Coming up on today's show, the Great British Lockdown. The government hits its vaccine target a day early, but when is lockdown going to end? The homeless crisis is rocketing once again. The pain continues. We talk to someone on the front line. And the extraordinary story of a paralysed man who's defied the odds and taken to walking to raise money for charity. All that and much, much more coming up on today's TICE Talk. Hello and welcome to my weekly show, TICE Talk. And thank you for all your comments, your questions. It's great to have so many people watching and building an audience to hear the alternative views and solutions. It's a welcome respite from the mainstream media. Talking of which, it's good to know that we've got a mention on BBC Radio 4 this week, so people are listening and watching and taking note. Now, after days of unbelievable winter conditions, plummeting temperatures, travel chaos, the snow is finally beginning to disappear, and that means I've made it back in to the studio, where once again I'm with my friend and colleague, former MEP colleague, David Bull. How are you, David?
I'm very well, thank you, Richard. I've missed you. I did wonder. I mean, last week was unbelievable here. I mean, you saw the pictures. I mean, it was extraordinary.
It looked pretty extraordinary.
It was, and actually it got worse and worse and worse, and it was really a death trap. The minute you went outside the house, you know, I fell over a couple of times, and I've pushed two people out of the snow.
There
so
you are,
I should get a little gold star.
You should get a little gold star. So, meanwhile, the news doesn't stop. What's your story of the week?
I mean, I think everyone's probably seen this by now, but you know, Zoom calls can often go wrong, can't they? And this involves a gentleman called Rod Pontin, who actually is a lawyer, and he went on to do a really important criminal trial on a Zoom call. Yeah. But when he appeared in front of the judge, instead of appearing as him, he appeared with a cat filter. And of course he saw it and then panicked and thought, I don't know what to do about it. And you can see his eyes darting backwards and forwards. And really, it is well worth a watch. And the crucial line in this, he goes, Judge, I'm not a cat. Have a look at this.
Mr. Pontin, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
we're
a
trying
look.
to. Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I love it. I'm not a cat. I mean, can you believe it?
Also, there's some other brilliant ones. So, for example, in a work meeting, the boss then managed to turn himself into a potato. So, I mean, I think everyone is absolutely desperate for this lockdown to end.
Cats, potatoes. What else is news? So, David, let's start with more good news. Let's tell us where we are with the vaccine progress this week.
I mean, it's been absolutely extraordinary. 15 million people have now had their first immunisation, and something like 500,000 have now had their second. And that's a great testimony to everyone who's involved with giving that immunisation. It's incredible. Extraordinary. But really crucially, and this will play later in our conversation, what we are now seeing from new data from Oxford is that death rates do seem to be dropping. And that's really important, by as much as something like 32%, and new cases are dropping by as much as 80%. And the really good news, and I think the government actually has done an incredible job, because all of those vulnerable people are now immunised, and of course we're now moving to the next section, which is those who are over 65 and those under 65 with chronic underlying health illnesses. So it won't be long before you and I are done.
Oh, steady.
So that's really extraordinary. And then I think also one of the other things, that British science is really extraordinary, and there is a company that's now looking at a different way of immunising. So at the moment, all the vaccines look at the spike protein. So to simplify that, let's take a cream egg, say.
Oh, delicious.
Delicious. So all the vaccines at the moment look at the chocolate covering and attack the chocolate covering. Now, the problem is the chocolate changes all the time. What this new vaccine does is it actually looks at the gooey middle of that cream egg, and by attacking that, that doesn't really change very much. So it looks like British science might ultimately have an incredible answer.
And what a fantastic description of how the vaccines work with the egg.
I've eaten too many cream eggs.
Me too. So that's all the good news, but now we've obviously got the tricky question of how quickly to start easing the lockdown, which is, is a really big decision. And people are very, very keen. We've got to start getting life back to normal. Yeah,
well, we're going to get an announcement from the government, I think, probably later this week about how they intend to do this. And, I spoke last week about how my mum's had it. And actually, if you actually back time this, so we know the vulnerable have now had their first immunisation. You really need to wait 3 weeks until that you can really start to unlock. And that's because that takes that 3 weeks to build the immunity. So then the date that everyone is starting to talk about is March the 8th. I'm cool with that. I think that's a great idea. I think we can start opening pubs, allowing people to eat outside. And crucially, schools must go back.
And that means all schools, not just the primary schools. I think this is the big battleground. Over the weekend, we had over 60 Tory MPs writing to the Prime Minister saying that they were determined that everything should be eased by the end of April, and that includes pubs and alcohol in pubs. Do you think they're going to make that?
I really hope so, because the key to this for me is the children to go back to school, allowing the parents to go back to work, allowing the businesses to recover, and actually having some sorts of normality. What we need more than anything else is a roadmap out. People have had enough. They need to see a light at the end of the tunnel, and I honestly think we're getting there.
People have had enough, and I think, we're going to talk about it later, but the pain, the suffering, and the misery. And it does appear as though Matt Hancock may actually be listening to us, because only in the last week, he started to talk about NHS reforms, which is fantastic. So, he is listening to us. And also, he used the same language that we've used, which is that, guess what? We're probably going to have this COVID vaccine every winter. I said last week, for the vaccine army, it'll be same time, same place next year.
Absolutely.
And Hancock now is actually saying that. It's going to be a bit like the flu vaccine.
He's really pivoted on that, and I think that's really interesting. It's a disease we're going to have to learn to live with. Remember, it's not an epidemic anymore. It is now endemic. And I do think we'll have a flu vaccine and a COVID vaccine.
But that's a question of leading the nation, educating the nation to understand this. There's going to be no such thing as zero COVID deaths. But, we're going to have to be vaccinated every winter. So that's great. Well, just finally on What's News, completely differently, we've got the issue of the cladding scandal. And, this is an unbelievable story. We're going to be coming back to it. But the government last week agreed that it would pay all the cost of removing and replacing the type of cladding that sadly was used in the Grenfell Tower disaster. But extraordinarily, the government's saying below 6 floors, actually they're not going to pay for that cost. They're going to burden that cost on the leaseholders, the owners. And this seems incredibly unfair.
Well, it is unfair. It's unfair because the people living there, it's not their fault. It's the fault of the people who built the buildings, the architects, who put that cladding in. Someone must have known something. Who was building control? Where was government at this stage? Now, either you pay for the cladding to be replaced or you don't. And there's a great article here in one of the newspapers saying that neighbours who are literally living 1 floor apart, because one's on the 6th floor, they pay nothing. And on the 5th floor...
So that's in a 6th floor building next door to
a bigger tower. Because if you live under that 6 floors, you're going to pay £40,000. Now, who has £40,000 kicking around? And now the government's saying, well, they're going to have to take a loan. No, it's wrong. It's got to change.
I think it will. We'll be coming back to it, and we'll be coming up with some proposals, because that is just completely unsustainable. And there are hundreds of thousands of people, potentially millions of people, who are tied up in this scandal. Well, thank you for that, David. That's great. Coming up, we meet the most incredible man who's turned adversity into triumph. We'll be talking to a journalist about why the COVID vaccine uptake is much lower in the BAME community, and we'll be hearing your thoughts and views. But for now, it's time for The Forgotten. Each week, we want to focus on a group who's particularly suffering under lockdown, so we can really understand the suffering, the misery, the pain being caused. And during the first lockdown, there was real help provided for the homeless, with almost all being helped into empty hotels to give them extra care and protection. But after that lockdown ended, it seems that matters may have slipped, and I've certainly noticed more people living back on the streets. So joining us now to discuss this, a real expert on the homeless problem, is Hugo Sugg, hopefully on the screen. Hi Hugo, great to have you with us. How are you?
Hi Richard, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, really appreciate you being with us. First of all, as a layman, just from what I've heard in the press, is that assessment right, that the government and the authorities made real progress in the first lockdown, but that things are different this lockdown? What's your sense of it? Someone on the front line.
Yeah, so the government, after the first lockdown, very quickly brought in the Everyone In scheme, which brought everyone in off the street, an estimated 15,000 rough sleepers across the country within 72 hours of it going live.
Wow.
So it really proved to charities in the sector that this problem of bringing in rough sleepers doesn't actually really exist, because the government could do it in 72 hours. Since then, they have actually stayed mostly in accommodation, but there are calls for another Everyone In scheme, kind of 2.0, if you like, to kind of bring anyone who's since been put on the streets. But we heard last night or yesterday that the eviction ban has been extended till March, which is really good. However, that does pose a problem that homelessness is coming. And as we try and eradicate COVID, we also have the potential 45,000 people coming back out onto the streets when they're evicted and when the lockdown is lifted. So a lot more needs to be done. And it's tough times at the moment, especially on the front line of homelessness.
Hugo, I know you're one of those people actually doing something about it. You run an organisation helping the homeless. Now, I understand that you yourself was homeless. So is that what inspired you? Is that because you understood, you knew what it was like?
Yeah, so at 18, I was homeless after a relationship breakdown, and I was sofa surfing for 3 months and slept one night on the streets. But it wasn't just about the homelessness for me, it was the after effects. So I still suffer from the trauma of that today. And it really spurred me to get campaigning, it spurred me to try and change policy, and it spurred me to create the Card and Bamford Foundation, which I'm very proud to lead. And we are just getting started. We're turning into a charity this year. And our work is just kind of being launched as we speak. Last week, we got our first volunteer in London doing our flagship satellite hub programme. So it's amazing work.
And the aim of the charity, Hugo, in a sentence or two, is what specifically?
So Carden Bamfield was a rough sleeper who died in Worcester in 2016, who I knew personally. And he died because there weren't enough closing of gaps in homeless services. So he fell through the gaps, and tragically he was found mummified in the tent. So what the Carden Bamfield Foundation is there to do is close all the gaps in homeless services across the country. So people like Carden Bamfield can't slip through the net, can't die. And if they do die, then an investigation is held straight into their death, because research from 2017, 18 and 19 showed that hundreds of people, rough sleepers, were dying across the country, but very, very few investigations were happening into their death. So we're there to try and change that and make sure that no one falls through the gap. And no one dies unnecessarily.
Sorry, Richard, one of the things that's going through my head is clearly we have the furlough scheme at the moment, which is allowing people to remain in work, at least being paid 80% of their wage by government. When that ends, which it will, and make no mistake, it will end, are you worried about what's going to happen in terms of the rise of people who are homeless?
Incredibly worried. It's one of the things that the Carden Bamfield Foundation have really been pushing in. Like I said a moment ago, homelessness is coming, and that's the hashtag that we're using. What we're trying to say, and what we've been lobbying government to do, is Everyone In 2.0, that's great, but what we also need is for them to bring in back into ownership and back into use housing which is fit for purpose. So when these estimated 45,000 people are evicted from their homes after the furlough scheme ends, after the eviction ban ends, then they actually have somewhere to go. Because what we're going to see at the moment, if we go down the same track we're going down, is all of these people ending up on the streets.
Yeah.
And then we just go back to the problem that we had pre the pandemic. And we know that the government can solve this issue because they did it with the 72 hours in March.
Exactly. If they've done it before, they can do it again. And Hugo, you know, people like yourself on the front line with your experience, you know, continuing to challenge and probe the government is so essential. And, you know, thank you so much for what you and your volunteers are doing. Absolutely fantastic. We wish you well. We'll stay in touch. It's so important as we come out of the lockdown.
Thank you,
brilliant.
Hugo.
Thank you very much indeed, Hugo.
Thank you, Gary.
I mean, you know, extraordinary, David. You know, that story, and just another really, really important group.
Well, it shows how desperate I think people are, and and people like Hugo are a godsend, aren't they? And the government needs to listen. Absolutely.
And you know, on a similar topic, I just picked this up in actually in the Spectator, a story of a lady who came into a doctor who wrote the article with her 2 children, and she was sobbing away, and she said to the doctor she couldn't cope anymore, and she asked the doctor to take her 2 children. And this, I mean, it's just unbelievable. She said, the doctor asked why, and she said she was worried she would kill the children and end up killing herself. I love them so much, she repeated. You know, and she lives in 2 rooms, a shared bathroom and kitchen with another family. One of her children, sadly, has autism. Another had behavioural problems and development delay. No family in the country. Her children were literally day in, day out, screaming and wailing. And you hear this.
You do.
You know,
and you see, on my Twitter feed, I heard this from many, many people saying that the government doesn't listen. It doesn't understand the true desperation that families are in, the desperate straits they're in at the moment. Yeah.
And what she then said, which was really telling about the lockdown, which I suspect ministers don't appreciate, you know, she hadn't seen her social worker for months. You know, there are no day centres open, no drop-ins, all of that's gone. And therefore her community mental health team, they're eventually shut up shop, working from home. Occasionally they phone her. So she's got no support. And, you know, it's a really, really important reminder. It's easy, you know, for people and civil servants and ministers in their big houses, you know, with Zoom to think everything's fine and dandy. But actually, it's really not. You know, the pain and suffering from people like that.
No support
huge.
And no hope.
Yeah.
What we have to do is give people hope.
Absolutely, and that's why we've got to end the lockdown. So, you know, really sobering stuff. But thank you for that, Dave. Well, for a little bit more uplifting, lighter mood, let's turn to our halftime piece, For Evan's Sake, where each week we want to bring you a feel-good story during this difficult time. So it's over to our reporter, Evan Boothby.
Yes, well, thank you, Richard. Hello and welcome to For Evan's Sake, the part in the show in which I bring you some exciting and uplifting, happy news stories from up and down the UK. This week, we're going to be meeting Simon Kindlysides. Now, Simon was paralysed due to a brain tumour back in 2013. However, due to the fantastic invention of something called an exoskeleton suit, he is now walking and raising money for the NHS. Here to tell his story, joining me live via Skype, is Simon. Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No, listen, you're very welcome. Thank you very, very much for coming on today. Listen, Simon, I've followed you on social media for quite a while now. And over the years, you've done some absolutely amazing things. But listen, tell us about what you're doing at the minute and why you're doing it.
So I'm paralysed from the waist down. I get to walk using an exoskeleton suit called a rewalk. So I've set myself a challenge of walking 4 miles a day, every day for the whole of February. So that will equal to about 112 miles. And I just thought to myself, if Sir Tom Moore can do it, then I thought to myself, right, I can do it during this lockdown to keep myself busy.
Absolutely, why not? And I think something that amazes me, the reason why you're so inspirational is because you're doing this all with this specially designed suit, and you walk more than me. Like, what inspires you to do this? Like, why do you get up every morning and think, oh, I want to do this walk? But like, I struggle to walk to my car in the rain, and you've been doing it. You chose to do it in February, in the snow, nothing is stopping you. What's inspiring you the most to do this?
It's hard work. I'm not going to lie. I'm in a lot of pain doing it. But you know, when you get diagnosed with a condition like a brain tumor, you don't know what your lifespan is going to be. So you can lay in bed and feel sorry for yourself and have full-time carers, or you fight it and achieve all your dreams and goals at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And one of the saddest things about your story is before this happened to you, you were quite into your dance, weren't you? You was doing like ballet and things like that. And I've noticed, was it yesterday or the day before, I saw on your TikTok or your Facebook or something, you'd done like a contemporary dance in a wheelchair, and I just thought this guy's amazing. Like, nothing is going to stop him. Like.
Yeah, I do miss dance. Obviously, I had dance as a backup because obviously singing is my main source of career. But obviously, I wanted something as a backup. But yeah, obviously, I do miss dancing 100%.
Well, look, I think you're absolutely fantastic. I'm sure the nation is behind you. I know you're getting a lot of coverage for this. So before we go, Simon, just tell us how can our viewers donate to your Walk for the NHS if they want to do so?
So if they go on GoFundMe.com and then it's /walking for the NHS. Within 14 days, I've raised £10,300. So it's still going up. And it's amazing, gone to the NHS.
Absolute amazing amount of money. And listen, Simon, I will get in touch with you at the end of February just so we can let everybody know what you've finally raised. I'm so sure it's going to be quite a lot. But look, best of luck with it all. Do come back and let me know exactly how far you get on with it. Thank you very much for joining us and take care of yourself.
Definitely.
Well, look, there we have it. What an inspirational chap. If you do want to donate to Simon's cause, I'll make sure the details go on the screen below me somewhere here now. But listen, thank you very, very much for watching. For Evan's sake this week, join me again next week for another fantastic inspirational news story across the UK. But for now, it's back to Richard in the main studio.
So do send us your uplifting stories, clips, comments, email them to ticetalk@reformtv.uk. Amazing story,
What
Dave.
an incredible man. I mean, really uplifting.
So
and
uplifting.
Incredible.
So motivating. Well, fantastic. And now it's time for the TICE report. As we mentioned at the top of the show, the vaccination rollout is going so well. But despite that good news, there are some major challenges in ensuring the vaccine reaches all of the most at-risk groups. And one of them is, of course, the BAME community, who appear to be more likely to suffer severe disease and hospitalisation. And yet it seems that the uptake of the vaccination in the BAME community is potentially as low as just 25%. And we want to see, is this true and why is this? So to discuss this, I'm delighted we're joined now by Anne Middle, who grew up in India and is now living in the UK as a freelance journalist. And Anne is with us now. Hi there, great to have you with us.
Hey.
So just give us your thoughts. What we sort of hear about and read about in the press, do you think that really is the case, that in the groups so far, that the BAME community are taking up the vaccine less than other groups?
I think so, yeah. Personally, people I know in my community, they're still okay for the vaccine. They feel like it's all about social media and it's about misinformation going on WhatsApp. I have heard stories about people not wanting to take the vaccine because of different reasons, because of a lot of conspiracy theories that have been going on. But from what I know, people in my community, people back home in India as well, and Indians who I know are living here, they're all for the vaccine. They want to take it because they know that if they don't take the vaccine, the virus is going to attack their community, and it's going to be very dangerous there.
I mean, you mentioned social media, which is really a very important point, I think. The fact is there are these wild theories that are on social media, and they're very, very dangerous. Just interestingly, when you break down the community, are you seeing a difference between the way that older people are reacting to having the vaccine and younger people? In my head, I kind of think young people are probably more pro it. I don't know.
That's very interesting, because I feel like older people are more pro it in my community. I feel like younger people, because of social media as well, it's very easy to float those theories, while older people, they have been through some stuff before in terms of, you know, pandemics, and they know vaccines are valid and they go through a regulatory process, and they won't ever be passed by government if, you know, if they weren't safe enough. So I feel like they have that kind of understanding, whereas people my generation, not necessarily so. Yes, there's always going to be a little bit of a divide between the two, but I feel from what I know, people my parents' age and my grandparents' age, they're all for the vaccine because they just want this thing to end now.
So do you think, Annie, that actually there's a potential that the mainstream media is overplaying this issue, and that the data may not really be actually what the mainstream media is talking about? I just wonder if that's a
that's completely different to what I expected. So really, it's the young people we need to target. But obviously they haven't had the vaccine rollout yet.
Yeah, exactly.
But yet, you're right, Richard. We're hearing... So why then are the newspapers saying that it is the older BAME community that aren't going out and getting their vaccines? Is the press wrong?
I wouldn't say the press is wrong. Just to be clear, I'm talking about the Asian community and the Indian community in particular, not about other minorities or the Black community. I feel like there is a lot of discrepancy there. I've heard a lot of stories, and of course I've seen social media, and people, especially, you know, people of one kind of thinking. They think, obviously, the vaccine is just something developed by the government or by the pharmaceutical industry to get more money out of them. I don't think the media is overplaying it. I just feel like they need to be more specific in what they're targeting and how they're reporting it, because sometimes they kind of miss the point. It isn't just, you know, old people from non-white communities that are influenced by places like WhatsApp.
I think it's an interesting point because you know, the government's got lots of adverts sort of scaring people about lockdown and staying at home, but maybe actually they need more positive information, more positive adverts about the vaccination and the benefits, Anne.
Absolutely. I think the awareness is key. I think trying to take on places like Facebook and WhatsApp and Twitter and kind of, you know, make sure there's no misinformation going around is key. It's similar to what happens in politics and with elections and the amount of misinformation rolling out there. It's just a lot more consequential in this case because we're dealing with life and death here. I think giving out the right information is necessary. I think reaching out to people from non-white communities is very important, and you know, not making them feel like targets or victims, but actually, you know, emphasizing with them.
Can I ask you a very quick question? There's £24 million being put in by the government for these community vaccine champions. Do you think that's the answer? Having people in the communities who are spreading the good word, making sure people go and get their vaccination?
It's a start, yeah. I mean, it's great if you can, you know, go and knock on doors and say, hey, take the vaccine. This is for real and it's benefit. But again, I think the government needs to do more in terms of kind of pressing down on social media.
More positive.
That's where the poison's coming from.
Fantastic. Anne, that's really, really interesting. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for sharing those thoughts with us and our listeners and viewers. I think that point about positive information, because it may well be that what the media is reporting may be different to what the data is really telling us.
And that's why we need people like Anne to tell us what's really going on the ground.
But I think, you know, a positive advertising campaign may actually be faster than the community champions, or a combination of the two. Well, fascinating. Thank you very much. So now we come to the section of the show where we look at actually your comments, what people are saying. We've had loads of emails. Thank you very much for these. Let's look at them now. So we've had lots of emails in, and the first one I just wanted to raise is from Colin, who says, hello, Richard. Could you tell me, are the Reform Party going to be standing candidates in the next elections, to which I can say, yes, the answer is very clearly yes. The elections, it does look as though they are going to take place in May, and we'll have candidates up and down the country. So I hope that answers that for Colin.
You're going to love this one. This one is from Patrick.
What's coming?
Well, Patrick says that you are very suave, actually, and that you are rather like Richard Madeley, which I would take as a compliment, actually, Housewife's favourite.
Right.
But he does say, please can you stop waving your arms around, because you are not a windmill.
I love waving my arms around, but I know it's an issue. I'll try and listen. And we've also had an email from Jane, who says, if the NHS really is the third largest employer in the world, and we have yet a relatively low number of clinical staff, then what does that say about the number of managers?
It says a lot, doesn't it?
It says a lot, James.
You know,
absolutely.
a lot of people who are there in those in that infrastructure who possibly we could condense.
Yeah, bang on the money. So thank you for that, Jane. And then we've got one from Jason, who was watching last week's, asking how should we solve the issue of the challenges on the Northern Ireland EU border and resolving that. And, you know, he says, I understand people sort of worried about, you know, not poking the big brown bear. I can't say that. But actually, you know, I think there comes a point at which you say, we're not going to be rolled over. Actually,
Correct.
you know, you've got to stand up and stand for Britain. What do you think?
Well, Northern Ireland has been completely, you know, left in the lurch, hasn't it? And actually, I don't really understand. Kate Hoey actually made a comment this morning, which I agree with. Why is everyone so obsessed with putting a border in the Irish Sea when actually the border really needs to be between the United Kingdom and you know, the Republic of Ireland? So actually, I think this is one that's going to run and run.
It is going to run and run. I've said it before, and I think we should keep on saying it. You know, ultimately, the Prime Minister is going to have to say enough's enough. You know, stop sort of pussyfooting around and say we'll give you a week's notice, but otherwise things are going to change, and we may not import German cars or French wine. We may not give authority for EU boats to fish in our waters. It's only by actually standing up to the bullies in Brussels that they'll listen to us.
Quite right.
Well, thank you for those comments. Please keep sending in your views, your comments, your criticisms.
No, don't.
And we'll try and take account and listen. And finally, we come to just, we always like to thank those who are doing some incredible work in the public sector. And this week, without question, my Tice thanks goes to Brigadier Phil Prosser, who's commander of 101 Logistics Brigade, who's been leading the Army's huge response to the vaccination programme, doing some sterling work. So thank you very much to the Brigadier and all of his team. And please do send in your suggestions and experiences where people have gone above and beyond to help others in their community or across the country. Well, time flies. That's all we've got time for this week. David, thank you very much. Any last minute
Yeah,
wrap
absolute
up?
pleasure. It's really fantastic to actually see the numbers growing, the audience growing, and I think people are really excited about the fact that it's not mainstream media, that they are actually getting an alternative view, alternative opinions, and long may it continue.
Well, thank you for that, and please keep sending us your views. So join us next week for more politics, views, honest opinions. Thank you for watching. See you next time. And hopefully we'll be a week closer to the pubs opening with some alcohol. Thank you and goodbye.